High above Wyoming's vast plains, mountain pass roads wind through jagged peaks and dense forests. Snow-capped summits shimmer in sunlight. Pine forests stretch endlessly along sharp cliffs. Rivers snake below, reflecting the sky. Headlights illuminate empty curves. Fog creeps along switchbacks, swallowing the road. Figures appear along the roadside, vanishing when approached. Locals whisper that some passes remember every accident, every traveler lost, every scream carried by the wind. Some roads are cursed, built along cliffs where bodies have fallen. Some are haunted by spirits of travelers who never reached home. And some travelers report being followed by shadows that move faster than any living being could. Visitors who drive these roads at night report lights flickering in abandoned cabins. Cold hands on shoulders, and echoes of footsteps on empty asphalt. Tonight, we journey through Wyoming to uncover the most haunted mountain pass roads. Places where beauty hides danger. And the past walks beside every traveler. If you were driving alone along a mountain pass at night and saw a figure standing on the road ahead, would you slow down to look, or would you steer away before it disappears into the fog? Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are safe tonight, because the mountain passes we are about to explore are treacherous in ways beyond the physical. Wyoming's mountain roads have seen centuries of history. Traders, explorers, settlers, and wanderers carved paths through these peaks. Some paths were used during harsh winters, others for gold prospecting and early transport. Over the years, countless travelers met misfortune. Locals speak of sudden cold gusts in the middle of summer, shadows on cliff edges, and faint cries that echo across valleys. These roads are more than asphalt and stone. They are silent witnesses to tragedy. Before we take this journey, let me ask you something. If you were driving along a foggy mountain pass and a ghostly figure appeared on a curve, would you stop to see who it is, or would you speed away and hope it disappears before you reach it? Teton Shadow Pass winds through the towering peaks of the Teton Range, a narrow road carved into stone and flanked by steep cliffs. By day, sunlight illuminates rugged ridges and pine forests, casting sharp shadows across the asphalt. The mountains are alive with the rustle of wind through trees, the distant cry of hawks, and the quiet motion of wildlife. Travelers moving along the pass admire the dramatic scenery, feeling the majesty and scale of the peaks that rise on either side. As evening approaches, the landscape begins to transform. The sun sinks low, painting the ridges in amber and gold. Shadows stretch long and thin across the road, merging with the dense forests and jagged rocks. The air cools rapidly, carrying a heavier chill than expected from the still warmth of the day. The pass seems to close in slightly, the cliffs sharper, the drop-off steeper, as if the mountains themselves are observing the approaching night. After sunset, subtle disturbances begin to emerge. Travelers report sudden cold drafts even on warm nights. The air moves in waves that do not follow wind patterns, brushing across the skin and flowing around vehicles. The chill is momentary but distinct, leaving a sensation of presence without visible cause. Campers and drivers alike pause, scanning the slopes and ridges for signs of movement. Outlines of people, standing or kneeling, emerge in gaps where moonlight strikes rock faces. They are translucent at first, fading in and out of view, yet clearly human in proportion and posture. Observers note that the figures do not move toward the road. They remain on ledges or behind jagged rocks, silent and still, watching as vehicles and people pass below. Moments later, they vanish entirely, leaving only the memory of observation. Travelers also report faint footsteps following their vehicles. Driving along the winding road, a soft tapping or crunch echoes just beyond the tires. Looking into mirrors or scanning the surrounding slopes reveals nothing. The sound disappears when attention shifts or when vehicles accelerate, only to reappear intermittently along the stretch of the pass. The combination of figures, cold drafts, and footsteps creates heightened awareness. Every turn and bend in the road draws attention, each shadow along the cliffs magnified. Travelers feel a persistent sense of observation, as if the mountains themselves are attentive to each motion. The effect is cumulative, a quiet tension that builds with every mile along the pass after dark. Steep cliffs, narrow lanes, and deep ravines distort sound and light. Moonlight reflects off rock surfaces, exaggerating shapes and shadows. Small gusts of air flowing through valleys create subtle movements among pine trees and loose stones, producing whispers of sound that feel deliberate. The road, carved tightly between peaks, channels every sensation, increasing the perception of presence and motion. Time feels altered along the pass. The pass. Minutes stretch unevenly. A short drive may feel much longer than the clock indicates. Observers often pause at hairpin turns, sensing the figures reappearing along ridges or hearing footsteps echoing again. The interplay of sound, shadow, and movement creates a disorienting rhythm that challenges ordinary perception. Natural explanations exist. Moonlight can illuminate rock surfaces in ways that create illusions of figures. Gusts of wind can produce temperature changes and move loose debris. Echoes along cliffs may create the sensation of footsteps. Fatigue and low light heighten perception of shadows and shapes. Yet these explanations do not fully account for the consistency of reports. Figures appear reliably along cliff edges, cold drafts arrive under calm conditions, and footsteps follow vehicles in patterns reported by multiple observers across different nights. The experience is repeatable under similar circumstances, suggesting that the pass itself interacts with presence and perception in a subtle, deliberate way. Travelers describe a mix of awe and unease. The mountains feel alive without aggression. The figures, shadows, and cold drafts create a sense of awareness and attentiveness. Observers experience heightened focus, noticing each rock, tree, and shadow with precision. Panic may arise briefly when figures appear in unexpected locations, yet the overall effect is one of quiet tension and fascination. By morning, Teton's shadow pass appears ordinary. Sunlight restores natural color and perspective. Shadows fall predictably along the ridges. Figures vanish. The air warms, carrying only normal mountain breezes. Travelers may question the events of the night, though memory preserves the intensity of observation and sensation. Each evening, as darkness falls, the pass awakens again. Cold drafts move without wind. Figures stand silently along cliffs. Faint footsteps follow vehicles. Shadows stretch and twist. The mountains observe and respond, holding memory and presence, quietly interacting with those who traverse the winding road after sunset. Teton's shadow pass does not threaten. It watches, it guides attention, and it allows visitors to witness the subtle awareness of landscape that exists beyond ordinary perception. Wind River Hollow winds through dense forest and jagged hills, a narrow pass where the earth slopes sharply on either side and the trees stretch tall and unbroken. By day, it appears calm and inviting, with sunlight filtering through pine needles and casting fragmented shadows along the winding road. Travelers pass with ease, hearing only the gentle rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, and the occasional crunch of tires on gravel. The air is crisp and clean, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. As evening falls, the hollow begins to change. Fog gathers slowly along the pass, first clinging to low-lying valleys, then creeping upward to obscure tree trunks and the edges of the road. The mist thickens rapidly, reducing visibility to a few feet. Shapes that were clear in daylight fade into gray silhouettes. Shadows stretch and blur along the edges of headlights, creating patterns that shift and twist with the passing vehicles. Lantern lights appear within the fog. Faint glows drift through the trees, small points of warm light moving along unseen trails. They rise and fall between the trunks, bobbing softly in rhythm with an invisible current. Travelers instinctively focus on them, drawn forward by their motion. The lights seem aware of observation, appearing just beyond reach and vanishing when approached directly. The fog alters perception. Distances appear longer or shorter than they are. Turns in the road feel disorienting. The edges of the forest seem to shift subtly, guiding attention along unseen paths. Even familiar landmarks take on new shapes under the veil of mist, creating the sense that the pass has expanded and contracted simultaneously. Travelers sometimes feel unseen hands. A light tapping can be felt on car roofs, brushing along the surface, quick and delicate. The sensation is fleeting, gentle, yet impossible to ignore. Drivers and passengers instinctively glance upward or around the vehicle, but see only fog, trees, and the dim glow of drifting lanterns. The contact leaves a heightened sense of awareness, a subtle reminder that the hollow is not empty. The combination of sound, touch, and light shapes experience. Each layer reinforces perception of presence. The fog carries sound further and differently than expected. The tapping moves unpredictably yet deliberately. Lanterns drift with soft persistence, illuminating sections of trees and ground before vanishing into mist. Travelers feel enveloped in a living environment, where every step and movement is echoed, mirrored, or enhanced by the hollow itself. Time feels suspended. Minutes stretch as attention narrows on the drifting lights, the tapping, and the fog-shrouded road. Travelers may pause instinctively, noticing every subtle change in shape or shadow. Watches and clocks provide little grounding. The rhythm of perception is determined by the fog, the lanterns, and the quiet pulses of unseen presence. Figures are glimpsed beyond the fog. Occasionally, travelers see outlines moving between trees, pacing slowly along paths that may not exist. They do not approach, nor do they interact directly. Their motion is deliberate and precise, blending with the drifting lanterns and shifting fog. Observers catch glimpses out of the corner of their eyes, only to find the shapes gone when looked at directly. The air grows heavier with attention. Every step along the winding road carries a sense of weight. Visibility is limited, and movement must be deliberate. Even small changes in vehicle speed or position are amplified in perception. The hollow seems to respond to attention, pressing subtly against travelers with gusts that carry chill without wind. The fog bends and amplifies the hum of tires, the creak of suspension, and the faint rustle of trees. Each echo creates a layered sense of depth, reinforcing the impression that the road and forest are alive with movement and observation. Whispers of wind carry suggestions of rhythm and presence, enhancing awareness of figures and lanterns beyond direct vision. Dawn gradually restores ordinary perception. Light filters through the mist, dissipating fog and clarifying shapes. Lanterns vanish, leaving only pale reflections on trees and wet ground. Tapping fades completely. Shadows compress naturally along the road. Familiar landmarks regain expected dimensions, and the pass feels calm and ordinary once more. Travelers leave with memory intact. They recall the drifting lanterns, the subtle taps on car roofs, and the pacing figures glimpsed between trees. The fog, light, and sound combine to create an experience of altered perception that lingers long after leaving. The hollow leaves a sense of presence, awareness, and temporal suspension in memory. Locals speak of Wind River Hollow cautiously. They describe nights when fog gathers thick, when lanterns drift between trees, and when attention is guided subtly by unseen forces. The pass is respected for its ability to shape perception and enhance awareness. Stories emphasize observation, patience, and caution, noting that the hollow responds to attention rather than aggression. By day, the pass is ordinary. By night, it becomes alive with presence. Fog, light, and sound interact to create a layered environment where every step, glance, and breath is magnified. Travelers learn that Wind River Hollow is more than road and trees. It is a space that listens, observes, and reminds all who enter that even in quiet forested passes, perception and presence can be altered. Attention can be guided. And some nights carry echoes that are felt more than seen. Even in quiet forested passes, perception and presence can be altered. Attention can be guided. And some nights carry echoes that are felt more than seen. Devila South Backbone Road winds sharply across a narrow ridge, the asphalt bending in abrupt curves as it traces the spine of the hills. By day, the road appears dramatic but manageable, bordered by steep drops and jagged rock outcroppings. Sunlight illuminates the surrounding forest and distant valleys, casting long shadows along the curves. As night falls, the atmosphere changes. Shadows stretch across the asphalt and the forest edges, merging with the darkness of the cliffs. The wind carries a chill, rustling leaves and branches with sudden whispers. The road feels narrower, confined, and more exposed. Silence dominates the space, yet it is layered, thick with anticipation and expectation. Each footstep, each vehicle will rolling across the surface, echoes unnaturally, carrying sound farther than it should. Whispers begin to rise. Soft, indistinct voices drift along the curves of the road. Some appear close, as if spoken directly in the ear, others distant, carried over ridges and valleys. They repeat words that are unclear, phrases that seem urgent yet incomprehensible. Occasionally, a soft scream threads through the whispers, low and haunting, fading quickly as if it were a memory rather than a present sound. Shadows cling to the edges of the cliffs. Dark forms rise along the ridges and slopes, their outlines human but indistinct. They hover, moving just slightly, never crossing the road itself. Observers feel their gaze even when no features are visible, a weight pressing subtly without aggression. The shadows shift with attention, drawing awareness to the curves, the drop-offs, and the narrow paths that define the backbone of the road. Eyes appear in the darkness. Small points of light hover along ridges and among trees, steady and deliberate. Observers describe them as watching, following, tracking movement across the asphalt. Sometimes one set appears, sometimes multiple pairs, all fixed in their place until attention turns directly toward them. Then they vanish, reappearing moments later elsewhere along the ridge. The combination of sound and shadow heightens perception. Footsteps, whispers, and the occasional soft scream create a layered soundscape that dominates attention. Shadows at the edges of vision suggest movement that cannot be confirmed. Every curve of the road feels more pronounced, every drop-off sharper, as if the landscape itself is guiding attention. Time stretches unnaturally along the ridge. Minutes blend into longer intervals as attention narrows to whispers and shadows. Observers feel their perception shift, caught between the motion of unseen figures and the stillness of the asphalt beneath their feet or tires. Curves appear longer, ridges taller, and the distance between visual markers seems to expand with each bend. The ridge responds to presence. Observers who linger on the road note subtle changes in shadows and echoes. Branches rustle without wind. Footsteps that do not belong move across rock or sand near the edge. Whispered sounds react to movement, fading when attention is diverted, intensifying when focus is held. The road feels alive, a place that remembers motion and adapts to observation. Even vehicles seem affected. Headlights cast illumination across ridges and trees, yet shadows bend around the light rather than retreat. Shapes appear briefly in the glare, then vanish as the vehicle approaches. The road itself appears to twist in perception, curves sharper in moonlight than daylight, the ridge more precarious, the depth of cliffs amplified by darkness. The experience is cumulative. Observation heightens the effect. The more time spent on the ridge, the more pronounced the whispers and the movement of shadows. The eyes become more numerous, glowing points scattered across ridges and forest edges. The soft screams echo with clarity, punctuating the whispers and movement of sand and rock along slopes. By dawn, Davila South Backbone Road returns to ordinary perception. Shadows settle, whispers fade, eyes vanish. The asphalt appears smooth, the curves as expected, and the drop-offs normal in scale. The wind carries no whisper, the forest is still, and the road seems as it did during daylight. Only the memory of night, the awareness of presence that cannot be traced or explained. Visitors leave carrying impressions rather than evidence. They recall shadows clinging to cliffs, glowing eyes tracking movement, whispers that rise and fall with the wind, and soft, haunting screams that echo across ridges. They remember the narrow curves, the heightened perception of every bend, and the sense that the road itself watches those who traverse it after dark. Davila South Backbone Road endures as a place of observation, memory, and presence. By day, it is dramatic and striking, a ridge road winding above valleys. By day, it is dramatic and striking, a ridge road winding above valleys. By night, it becomes alive with whispers, shadows, and glowing eyes. Travelers who enter the road after sunset experience the ridge as both landscape and participant, a place where curves, cliffs, and the hollow spaces of the desert converge with perception, memory, and the unseen watchers that linger along every bend. Here, the ridge bends sharply. Shadows cling. Eyes watch silently. And at Davila South Backbone Road, the night itself feels alive, observing endlessly from the edges of cliffs and curves that never truly end. Snowy Peak Trail winds through high-altitude terrain, carved along jagged ridges and steep cliffs. The road is narrow, lined by weathered guardrails that struggle against the wind and the passage of time. During the day, the trail is striking, mist rolling along the mountainside, sunlight glinting off patches of ice and frost. Rocks jut sharply from slopes, and evergreens cling stubbornly to ledges where soil is thin. The altitude makes each breath feel heavier, each step or turn more deliberate, as travelers navigate the winding path through the peaks. As the afternoon fades, the mist thickens. It flows down the slopes and into the valleys, swallowing the road in a pale gray blanket. Visibility drops quickly, and the air grows cold and damp. The sound of wind becomes more distinct, carrying subtle echoes of rocks shifting and distant animal calls. The trail seems narrower now, confined by mist that dampens the sense of space and stretches perception. Travelers often notice the first anomalies through their vehicles. Engines stall without explanation. Electrical systems fail briefly. Radios or GPS screens flicker, showing static or momentarily losing signal. The vehicle may respond again after a restart, yet the interruption leaves a lingering unease. These interruptions are brief but enough to draw attention to the strangeness of the trail. Figures appear along the guardrails. At first, they are shadows, human in shape, glimpsed from the corner of the eye. Gradually, their outlines take form, standing upright, walking slowly along the barriers. They move deliberately but never descend the slope or approach the road. When observers attempt to approach or focus directly on the figures, they vanish, leaving only the guardrails and mist behind. Mist amplifies the sense of isolation. Every sound is echoed and distorted. Tires crunching on gravel, wind whipping against vehicles, and the faint rustle of trees are carried strangely along the trail. Sounds seem to come from unexpected directions. The figuresa presence feels heightened by the surrounding haze, their movement impossible to track clearly, yet undeniably perceptible. The road itself seems alive at night. Reflections of headlights on wet or icy patches produce shifting shadows that Guardrails glint unpredictably. The curves of the trail appear longer or steeper than before. Travelers report a sense of compression, where the road narrows imperceptibly. And expansion, where the misted landscape seems farther than reality suggests. Perception is constantly tested. Figures along the guardrails appear and vanish with no pattern. Each appearance feels deliberate, timed to coincide with a moment of attention. The mind interprets the shadows as human, yet no steps, voices, or movements confirm their presence. Travelers become acutely aware of every motion, every sound, every flicker of light along the trail. Mist shifts subtly, responding to observation. Dense patches gather near corners, obscuring curves, while other areas appear thinner, revealing shapes that vanish when focused upon. The trail feels responsive, as though the environment senses attention and adapts to it. Every glance toward the cliff edges reveals something fleeting, every blink erases it. The interruptions to vehicles continue. Lights dim briefly. Engines cough and stall. Radios crackle with static. These events are intermittent, never lasting long enough to cause danger. Yet consistent enough to reinforce the impression that the trail itself has influence over those who travel it. Drivers often describe a sensation of attention from beyond the mist. A presence monitoring each movement. Travelers report a combination of anticipation and tension. The faint outlines of figures along the guardrails, coupled with the unexplained stalling, create a sense of vigilance. Every turn demands focus. Every movement is measured. Breathing becomes conscious. The mind scans constantly for the cause of shadow and sound. The trail enforces attention without threat, guiding awareness through subtle environmental cues. By midnight, the trail is fully transformed. Mist is thick and shifting, figures appear with brief clarity. And vehicle systems experience intermittent anomalies. The trail feels suspended in time. Perception of distance and scale shifts, leading travelers to be hyper-aware of every step, every curve, and every light reflection. Shadows along the cliffs create the illusion of depth where none exists. And the fog amplifies each sound into its own echoing resonance. As dawn approaches, the trail returns to ordinary appearance. Mist lifts gradually. Shadows recede. Figures vanish entirely. Vehicle systems operate normally. The trail regains its familiar appearance, sun striking rock and tree, light illuminating curves and guardrails without anomaly. Travelers may question what they experienced, yet the memory of figures, stalled engines, and shifting mist remains vivid. Locals speak quietly of Snowy Peak Trail. They warn that after dark or in heavy mist, the trail changes. That vehicles may stall, that shadows appear along guardrails, and that perception is tested by the canyon, the cliffs, and the high-altitude environment. They recall figures walking along the guardrails, engines stalling inexplicably, and mist swirling unpredictably. The trail leaves an impression that lingers long after the journey ends, heightening sensitivity to movement, sound, and shadow. Snowy Peak Trail endures. Its road winds through high peaks. Mist rolls along its path. Vehicles falter. And figures appear along guardrails. Shadows shift. Engines stall. Perception is stretched. Those who travel it understand that the trail itself observes, responding to awareness, preserving memory, and transforming ordinary passage into an experience where reality, mist, and shadow converge. At high altitude, Red Rock Mountain Pass stretches across the high peaks, its jagged ridges and scarred cliffs carved by centuries of erosion and occasional rock slides. By day, the landscape is stark and dramatic, layers of red and rust-colored stone creating a patchwork of ridges and slopes. Trails wind through the pass, narrow and uneven, guiding hikers along paths that demand attention and care. The wind moves freely here, carrying the scent of stone and dust across the peaks. Even during daylight, the pass feels charged. The rocks are jagged and sharp, the slopes steep. Shadows cling to crevices and caves, giving the impression of depth beyond physical measurement. There is a stillness that carries memory, a weight left by years of passage and events that shaped the mountain. Travelers feel a subtle awareness of danger, a need for caution beyond ordinary terrain. Rock slides have claimed lives here. Over time, entire sections have given way without warning, sending boulders and debris down slopes. Local accounts speak of hikers and climbers caught unexpectedly, swept away by sudden shifts of stone. Though the slopes have stabilized in some areas, the legacy of these events lingers in the landscape, in the arrangement of rocks, and in the tension that fills the air. Visitors approaching the pass after sunset notice a change. Shadows deepen, blending cliffs and slopes into a seamless darkness. The outlines of the ridges are visible only where moonlight catches the tops of rocks, creating stark highlights against black recesses. Every sound is amplified, yet the direction is ambiguous. The pass feels larger, more intimidating, and strangely unfamiliar even to those who know it in daylight. Figures appear among the rocks. They stand silently, human in shape but unmoving. Some perch on ledges, others at the base of steep slopes, appearing partially obscured by shadows. Faint cries are carried by the wind. They rise intermittently, soft and indistinct, like echoes of distant voices. The sounds are never constant and seem to come from multiple directions. Travelers searching for the source find only rock and darkness. The cries are low, carrying emotion without forming words, a reminder of lives lost and of the pass's history. The pass itself seems to respond to attention. Looking directly at a figure may cause it to vanish into shadow, only to reappear moments later in a slightly different position. Shadows shift along rock faces, accentuating angles and cracks. Peripheral vision registers movement even when central vision is focused elsewhere. The mountain feels aware of observation, subtly guiding perception. The temperature changes unexpectedly. Even on warm nights, pockets of cold air drift along ledges or through crevices. A chill brushes along skin, often near the shoulders or neck, enhancing the sense of presence. The effect is fleeting but repeated, drawing attention to the immediate surroundings and heightening sensory awareness. Footsteps and echoes behave strangely. Travelers moving along trails notice that their own steps echo differently, sometimes louder, sometimes muted. Sounds appear to come from directions that do not match physical terrain. Even distant rustling of rocks or gravel carries with unusual clarity, as though the pass exaggerates every sound while concealing its source. Observers describe disorientation. The slopes appear to stretch farther than expected. Trails curve unexpectedly, shadows mislead perception of depth. Attempts to retrace steps or descend quickly may leave the traveler uncertain of location. Some report that landmarks visible during daylight seem distorted or entirely absent at night. Despite the intensity, the figures are not hostile. They remain distant, standing silently among the rocks. No aggressive movement occurs, and no direct interaction is reported. The experience is psychological and sensory, emphasizing awareness of surroundings and heightening caution rather than producing fear through direct threat. The cries continue intermittently. They rise and fade unpredictably, drawing attention to areas that appear empty. Travelers may pause, waiting for another sound, their focus sharpened on the slope or ledge where the sound seemed to originate. Even when no figure is visible, the sense of history and observation remains. Time seems altered in the pass. Minutes stretch unpredictably. Ascending a short incline may feel like an extended effort. Standing near a figure or listening to the cries can distort perception of duration. Observers describe the combination of darkness, echoes, and presence as disorienting yet immersive, heightening attention to the immediate environment. Daylight restores clarity. Rock formations appear stable and familiar. Trails are recognizable. Shadows behave naturally. And the glowing outlines of figures disappear entirely, leaving only the natural sounds of wildlife or distant movement. The pass appears calm, navigable and unthreatening. The extraordinary effects of night hidden until darkness returns. At night, Red Rock Mountain Pass transforms. Figures stand silently among rocks. Shadows lengthen and shift. Faint cries echo across ridges. Temperature fluctuates subtly. Time and distance become unreliable. Travelers experience heightened awareness and a persistent sense of history, of memory carried in stone and sand. Red Rock Mountain Pass endures as a place where landscape, history, and perception converge. It challenges visitors to navigate not only physical terrain but the subtle interplay of shadow, sound, and presence. A pass that observes quietly, and a landscape shaped by both natural forces and the lingering echoes of those who came before. Black Pine Pass winds through dense forests of towering pine, their trunks dark and straight, rising high above the road. By day, sunlight filters through branches, creating patterns of light and shadow across the asphalt. Needles carpet the forest floor, and the scent of pine fills the air. Birds flit between branches, and the occasional rustle of small animals breaks the silence. Travelers passing through admire the majesty of the trees, the sense of seclusion, and the quiet rhythm of the forest. As the sun begins to set, the atmosphere shifts subtly. Shadows lengthen along the road and between trees, stretching across the forest floor. The air cools, carrying the scent of resin and damp earth. Light diminishes quickly beneath the dense canopy, and the forest seems to grow taller, enclosing the narrow road with its silent, watchful presence. The familiar scenery begins to feel more alive, more attentive, as if the forest itself is aware of each passing vehicle. After sunset, faint disturbances begin to emerge. Branches snap without wind, crisp cracks echoing through the trees. The sound is deliberate, uneven, coming from deep within the forest. Travelers pause, straining to locate the source, but nothing is visible. Figures appear intermittently beside the road. They are faint, blurred forms at first, pacing along the edge of the asphalt. Their posture is upright and deliberate. They do not approach vehicles but maintain a steady, silent observation. Eyes are indistinct, faces obscured by shadows and distance. Moments later, they vanish entirely, leaving no trace in the pine-needled ground or the road. The movement is precise, brief, and repeated along stretches of the pass. The interplay of sound, shadow, and presence intensifies perception. Every snapped branch, shifting shadow, and glimpse of a figure creates heightened awareness. The forest itself amplifies the experience. Tall pines distort sound, carrying snaps and echoes farther than expected. Low light and dense foliage create patterns of shadow that move independently of observers' emotions. Narrow clearings and ridges alter perception of distance, making figures appear closer or farther than they truly are. Every movement along the road is mirrored subtly in the surrounding forest, reinforcing the sense of watchfulness. Time behaves differently within Black Pine Pass at night. Minutes stretch unpredictably. A brief drive along a short section of road can feel prolonged, filled with echoes, movement, and glimpses of figures. Pausing to observe the forest, travelers often experience heightened focus, as though every detail is amplified and deliberate. The road, trees, and shadows collaborate to alter perception of duration, distance, and motion. Natural explanations exist. Sound travels unusually through dense forests. Moonlight and dim visibility create illusions of movement. Wind, even gentle, can snap small branches and sway foliage. Observers may interpret fleeting glimpses as figures. Psychological effects heighten perception in isolated and dimly lit environments. Yet these explanations do not fully account for consistency. Multiple visitors describe near-identical experiences on different nights. Travelers report a mix of awe and unease. The forest is not threatening, yet its awareness is palpable. Figures, shadows, and snapped branches evoke curiosity, tension, and reflection. Observers describe a sense of being watched, an attention that is deliberate yet non-aggressive. Panic is rare but rises naturally when figures appear suddenly or when sound echoes unexpectedly. The overall experience is immersive, altering perception and sharpening awareness. By dawn, Black Pine Pass returns to normal. Sunlight illuminates the tall pines and the forest floor. Shadows align with natural light. Snapped branches lie scattered but without movement. Figures are absent, leaving only memory. Travelers who pass through during daylight often doubt the events of the night, though the recollection of sound, motion, and presence remains vivid. Each evening, as darkness falls, Black Pine Pass awakens. Branches snap without wind. Figures appear briefly beside the road. Figures appear briefly beside the road. Shadows twist independently between the pines. Shadows twist independently between the pines. Travelers feel an invisible awareness, subtle and attentive. Travelers feel an invisible awareness, subtle and attentive. The forest observes, responding to presence and motion. Creating a space where light, sound, and shadow combine to produce an experience that is both mysterious and profound. Black Pine Pass does not harm. It watches, it guides attention, and it preserves the quiet memory of countless nights under the dark canopy of pine. Echo Canyon Road winds through towering cliffs and jagged rock formations, a narrow path carved over centuries by water and wind. By day, it feels remote and majestic. Sunlight glances off sandstone walls, highlighting ridges and crevices in gold and amber. The air is dry and crisp, carrying the scent of stone and earth. Travelers follow the winding road, hearing only tires on gravel, the occasional bird call, and the whisper of wind through sparse vegetation. As evening descends, the canyon begins to transform. Shadows deepen across cliff faces, stretching along the road and fading into crevices. Light disappears quickly, leaving only faint traces of color and the encroaching gray of dusk. The narrow walls of the canyon trap sound, creating a sense that every motion, every breath, is magnified. The air feels heavier, more deliberate, pressing against those moving along the road. The canyon amplifies every sound. Footsteps echo far longer than expected, bouncing between rock faces in irregular patterns. The snap of a twig or the crunch of gravel is repeated multiple times, layering across distance and height. Even the smallest noises are carried along the cliffs, creating an atmosphere of presence without visible source. Travelers notice that sounds they make are returned to them in unexpected ways, slightly altered in pitch or timing, as if the canyon itself is responding. Voices begin to emerge. Travelers become alert to their surroundings. Every sound is scrutinized, every shadow examined. Cliff faces appear to shift subtly in low light, dark crevices deepening or moving with the play of shadows. Shapes appear at the edge of vision, sometimes fleetingly outlined by moonlight or headlights. Shadows move along ridges and walls, pacing slowly, seemingly independent of any known source. The interplay of sound and shadow creates heightened perception. Travelers report moments when whispers and echoes feel almost sentient, responding to motion, attention, or even silence. The canyon becomes a layered environment where reality and perception intertwine. Footsteps may appear to match shadows, and echoes seem to anticipate motion. The road is ordinary in structure, yet the experience suggests something alive in the canyon itself. Shadows appear intermittently. They glide across cliff faces, shifting with faint light. Observers catch glimpses from the corner of their eyes, fleeting shapes that bend and stretch along rock formations. They vanish when confronted directly, leaving only the impression of movement. The effect heightens attention and creates a subtle tension that is never threatening but always present. Time feels altered along the road. Minutes stretch and compress unpredictably. A short walk may feel longer, an hour may pass unnoticed when focused on sound and movement. Each step is measured not by distance but by the cadence of echoes and shifting shadows. Travelers often pause to listen. Every sound is magnified, every word returned. The repeated phrases seem layered, overlapping in ways that make direction and source difficult to determine. Observers feel enveloped by sound, aware of their own presence and the way it resonates with the canyon. The observer is aware of their own presence and the way it resonates with the canyon. The road seems both familiar and altered. Landmarks appear closer or farther than expected. Travelers experience a heightened awareness of space, motion, and the interplay between sound and environment. Morning restores clarity. Shadows compress and echoes return to ordinary behavior. The road appears as it did by day, open and empty, with no trace of the night's activity beyond memory. Travelers leave changed. They recall voices repeating their words, footsteps echoing independently, and shadows pacing along cliff faces. Time, distance, and attention feel altered in memory. The canyon has left a lasting impression, a subtle awareness of presence and perception beyond ordinary understanding. Locals speak of Echo Canyon Road with caution. They describe the amplification of sound, the persistent echoes, and the fleeting shadows as part of the canyon's nature. Nights when the road seems alive are treated with respect, emphasizing observation, patience, and awareness. The canyon preserves perception in ways that are subtle yet profound. By day, the canyon appears ordinary. By night, it becomes a space where sound carries memory. Shadows hint at presence, and awareness itself is heightened. Travelers who enter after dusk find that Echo Canyon Road is not simply a passage through stone, but a living environment, where voices, footsteps, and shadows guide attention, alter perception, and leave an indelible mark on those who walk its winding path. Lone Wolf Pass stretches across a desolate ridge, a narrow road flanked by cliffs and dense trees that vanish into darkness at night. By day, it appears quiet but ordinary. Sunlight illuminates asphalt and rock, shadows fall predictably, and the occasional traveler passes along the ridge, aware of the steep drop-offs yet undisturbed. The air is crisp and dry, carrying the scent of earth, stone, and sparse vegetation. As dusk descends, the landscape changes. Shadows deepen along the roadside and cliffs, merging with the dense forest that borders the pass. The temperature drops quickly, carrying a chill that penetrates clothing and skin. The road narrows in perception, confined by darkness and the absence of other travelers. Silence dominates, yet it feels layered, as though the night itself is listening. Figures begin to appear. From the distance, within the range of headlights, silhouettes emerge briefly. They stand at the edge of the road or on the ridge above, appearing solid for a heartbeat before dissolving into darkness. They are humanoid, sometimes tall, sometimes crouched, yet never fully detailed. They are gone the instant one focuses on them directly, leaving only the memory of presence. Chills accompany the sightings. Travelers feel sudden cold rush over their shoulders and back, sharp and immediate. Headlights illuminate fleeting motion. Shadows and figures appear only within the beams of vehicles or flashlights. The road feels alive under observation, responding subtly to motion and light, guiding perception toward distant ridges and empty stretches of asphalt. The pass exerts a quiet influence. Even those who pause or slow feel pressure, subtle but pervasive. Every twist of the road, every incline, and every bend seems to emphasize exposure and vulnerability. The mind sharpens to detail, distant ridges, low tree lines, and subtle shifts in shadow become prominent. The pass focuses attention without aggression. Movement is inconsistent yet deliberate. The figures appear and vanish without warning. Sometimes they emerge in clusters, other times alone. Sounds seem amplified at night. Distant rocks settling, leaves shifting, and vehicles passing in the far distance carry unnaturally across the ridge. Footsteps that cannot belong to any visible person echo briefly before fading. The effect is layered, creating a perception of depth and presence that exceeds physical evidence. Time stretches unnaturally along the pass. Minutes merge, perception slows, and attention focuses entirely on the roadway. Ridges, and occasional apparition. Repetition of appearances and the accompanying chill create a sense that the pass is alive with memory, observation, and quiet motion. The mind becomes attuned to subtle cues in sand, asphalt, and shadow. Observers often feel they are being watched. Even when alone, the sensation persists. The mind interprets shapes and shadows as presence. The chill intensifies awareness of every curve, incline, and drop-off. The road conveys observation without form, guiding perception toward distant ridges and darkened forest edges. The effect is cumulative. The next appearance, sudden and fleeting, gains greater significance. Headlights reveal forms in unexpected locations, shapes on ridges or at the edge of the forest. Each sighting reinforces the sense of presence and compulsion to remain aware, attentive, and cautious. By dawn, Lone Wolf Pass returns to ordinary perception. The asphalt appears smooth and unbroken. Shadows align naturally with the early light. The temperature stabilizes, and the wind returns to its normal rhythm. Figures vanish, leaving no trace, and the chill disappears as sunlight touches stone and trees. Only memory preserves the nighttime presence. Travelers leave carrying lasting impressions. They recall fleeting figures, glowing shapes within headlights, the sudden chills, and the sensation of being observed. Even when the pass appears ordinary, the memory of night heightens awareness of every ridge, curve, and shadow. The experience remains vivid, lingering beyond the physical landscape. Lone Wolf Pass endures as a place of memory, perception, and subtle presence. By day, it is calm and scenic, a ridge road open to travelers. By night, it is alive with figures, observation, and the quiet echo of footsteps and whispers. Those who traverse the pass after dark experience the ridge as both landscape and participant, a space where the road itself watches, shadows linger, and the memory of presence persists, endlessly and silently. Each curve and turn demands careful navigation, the drop below vanishing into mist or shadow depending on the time of day. Wind carries the scent of stone and sparse vegetation clinging stubbornly to ledges. As dusk falls, the road transforms. Shadows deepen across the cliffs, merging with the gaps in rock to create shapes that seem both familiar and impossible. The temperature drops, carrying a chill that penetrates the skin and sharpens awareness. Silence settles over the road, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind against stone. The landscape feels heavier, more deliberate, as though the cliffs themselves are observing each movement. Visitors notice the first anomaly in sound. Rocks fall from the cliffs above, clattering onto the road or rolling into shadowed ravines. The sound is unmistakable, loud enough to startle, yet when observers search for the source, no rock is dislodged, and no debris lies where it should have landed. The echoes repeat intermittently, sometimes one strike, sometimes multiple, as though the cliffs themselves are marking the passage of time. Every movement is echoed. Footsteps on gravel sound sharper and heavier. Shifting stones produce distant reverberations. Even the faintest vibration of a passing vehicle or shifting wind seems magnified, creating the impression of additional presence along the road. At first, they are shadows, moving lightly along the highest ridges. Gradually, shapes take form, appearing human yet intangible. They stand motionless or step slowly along ledges. Observers report that the figures do not advance toward the road or retreat. They vanish instantly when approached, leaving only the empty cliff edge behind. The outlines are visible just long enough to register, producing a lingering sense of awareness and observation. The Roada-esque curves and narrow passages heighten unease. Each turn reveals new cliff faces and valleys, shifting perspective and distance. Shadows stretch differently along bends, making the terrain appear longer or steeper than it truly is. Observers report that figures reappear farther along the road than expected, maintaining a presence just out of reach. Every glance upward seems to coincide with a shift in shadows or movement at the cliff edge. Rocks continue to fall unpredictably. The sounds are not random. They echo with rhythm and repetition, marking time or reacting to movement along the road. No wind or loose stones explain the origin. The clatter is precise, intermittent, and unsettling, reinforcing the sense that the road and cliffs are alive to the presence of visitors. Travelers report a heightened sense of awareness. Each breath is conscious, each step deliberate. The wind, faint and irregular, carries distant echoes that blend with the sound of rocks striking stone. Peripheral vision captures fleeting shapes that disappear when looked at directly. Attention is drawn simultaneously to the cliffs above, the edge below, and the road ahead, producing a state of acute observation and subtle tension. The experience is not threatening but insistent. The figures at the cliff edge do not pursue. The falling rocks cause no injury. The road exerts influence, guiding awareness, enforcing caution, and creating the impression that each movement is noted. Observers feel the cliffs observing, their presence amplified by sound and shadow. Their presence amplified by sound and shadow. At night, the road transforms further. Shadows dominate, stretching into the lanes and valleys. Figures appear more clearly at the cliff edges, standing, moving briefly, then vanishing. Rocks fall at irregular intervals, echoing across the peaks and down into ravines. Mist may roll in from valleys, softening edges, extending shadows, and amplifying sound. The air grows colder, denser, and carries a tangible weight along the road and cliff sides. By dawn, shattered Summit Road returns to ordinary appearance. Cliffs remain jagged and imposing. Shadows shorten. Rocks no longer fall without source. Figures vanish completely. The mist lifts, revealing valleys and peaks in full daylight. Travelers may doubt the night's experiences, yet memory preserves the sensation of presence, sound, and observation. Locals speak quietly of the road. They warn that after dark, or during heavy mist, the cliffs appear alive. Figures can be glimpsed along edges. Rocks fall without reason. Perception is stretched. Attention becomes acute. The road is a place where observation is returned, where cliffs remember, and where the landscape subtly enforces caution and awareness. Cliffs rise sharply. Shadows stretch. Rocks fall without origin. Figures appear and vanish. Perception is heightened. The road listens. It observes without eyes. It responds without motion. Those who traverse it understand. Each step, each glance, and each breath is noted and reflected. Along the jagged cliffs of Shattered Summit Road. Twilight Ridge Road winds along the edge of steep hills, its curves sharp and narrow, the asphalt slick with evening dew. By day, the surrounding forest appears calm and quiet, pines rising along the roadside, their needles glinting in sunlight, shadows shifting gently with the breeze. Small cabins dot the hillside, abandoned but sturdy, their wooden walls weathered by wind and rain. The road itself seems ordinary, a path between hills and valleys, inviting travelers yet demanding care. Night brings fog. It rolls in thick and sudden, descending from the ridge and filling the valleys in dense layers. Visibility drops quickly. Trees emerge as pale silhouettes through gray mist. Shadows deepen and blend, obscuring familiar landmarks. The fog carries moisture and silence, swallowing sound and creating a sensation of isolation. Glowing eyes appear along the roadside. At first, they seem like distant headlights or reflections, but they remain stationary, sharp and deliberate. Observers report pairs of eyes hovering at the edge of trees, peering from behind rocks, and sometimes just above the roadside. They do not move in conventional ways, appearing closer or farther as the observer's attention shifts. The eyes never blink or shift independently, yet their presence is unmistakable, drawing attention and unease. Cabins along the road contribute to the mystery. Some visitors notice faint lights inside windows, dim glows that appear as if someone occupies the structures, yet they remain abandoned. The illumination shifts subtly, sometimes flaring briefly before dimming again. No movement is observed inside, and the doors remain closed. The effect is subtle but disorienting, suggesting life where none should exist. The fog amplifies every sound. Footsteps echo against the asphalt. Distant wildlife is muted, altered, or seemingly closer than expected. The wind carries a low rustling through trees, shifting leaves and branches in patterns that seem timed to the movement of the fog. Observers often pause to listen, their senses heightened, unsure which sounds originate from the natural world and which are drawn from perception. The road itself seems altered. Curves appear sharper, distances stretch or compress. Trees that seemed distant during daylight now loom closer, and familiar markers vanish within the mist. Travelers report an increased sense of disorientation, as though the road itself reshapes for those navigating it at night. Glowing eyes sometimes seem to move with travelers. When observed from the corner of the eye, the lights may appear to follow vehicles or footsteps, shifting along the roadside or through the trees. Direct attention can cause the eyes to vanish temporarily, only to reappear moments later elsewhere along the route. Observers describe the sensation as both compelling and unnerving, drawing attention without threatening. Some lights flare when observers slow or stop, while others appear to retreat when approached. The windows remain intact, doors locked, and interiors empty. Yet the combination of glow, mist, and shadow creates the impression of activity. Observers often feel watched or guided by unseen presence, and hesitation intensifies the perception. Temperature and sensation shift subtly. The fog carries a chill, settling along shoulders and neck, even when air temperatures are mild. The cold feels directed at the observer, moving with attention and presence, drawing awareness to both surroundings and self. Time behaves oddly along Twilight Ridge Road. Minutes stretch and compress unpredictably. A brief walk along the roadside feels far longer. Stopping or observing intensifies awareness of distance and isolation. The combination of fog, eyes, and cabin lights alters conventional judgment, leaving travelers uncertain of both time and location. Despite the intensity, there is no direct threat. The glowing eyes do not attack. The cabin lights remain contained. The road itself presents no sudden obstacles beyond natural curves and slick surfaces. Danger is psychological and perceptual, an interplay of awareness, uncertainty, and subtle environmental cues. Observers report heightened senses. Sounds carry differently, shadows appear alive, and peripheral vision captures motion that disappears upon direct observation. Attention sharpens, reflexes increase, and the mind becomes focused entirely on the surrounding fog, lights, and shapes. Daylight restores normal perception. The fog lifts, trees and cabins return to familiar forms, and glowing eyes vanish entirely. Cabin interiors appear dark and empty. Trails along the roadside are visible again, and distances match expectation. At night, Twilight Ridge Road transforms. Fog rolls in thick and sudden. Glowing eyes appear along the roadside. Lights flare inside abandoned cabins. Shadows shift unpredictably. Perception of distance, time, and scale alters. Visitors feel observed, disoriented, and drawn to the mysterious elements along the route. Twilight Ridge Road endures as a place of quiet perception. It reminds those who travel it after dark that the landscape holds memory and influence beyond the ordinary. Shadows, light, and fog shape awareness. And the road itself becomes a space where perception, history, and mystery converge. Those who traverse the ridge at night witness an environment alive with subtle presence. A crossing that challenges senses and attention. Quietly observing every step along the way. Frostbite Pass winds through a high mountain range, its road narrow and flanked by jagged peaks dusted in snow. By day, sunlight glints off icy surfaces and frost-coated pine trees, casting crisp shadows across the asphalt. Travelers moving along the pass notice the stark beauty of winter, the quiet stillness, and the sharp contrast between frozen rock and white snow. Each breath carries a chill, and the air smells faintly of pine and cold earth. As evening approaches, the light fades quickly. Shadows stretch long across the road, blending with the snowdrifts and ice formations along the mountainsides. The temperature drops rapidly, and the wind carries a sharper bite than expected, swirling around bends and down valleys. Even the most confident travelers notice a subtle tension in the air. The pass feels smaller, enclosed by peaks, and every movement echoes more distinctly. After sunset, unusual sounds begin to emerge. Travelers hear crunching footsteps in the snow, soft at first, distant yet precise. The rhythm is deliberate, matching the pacing of someone walking, yet when observers scan the area, no one is visible. The sound grows closer, then retreats, creating an awareness of presence without form. Figures appear in the distance. Along ridges or through snowy clearings, faint human shapes emerge. They move slowly toward the road, upright and deliberate. Their forms are indistinct, blurred against the snow and dim light, yet clearly humanoid. Travelers often hold their breath, watching as the figures approach, only to vanish completely before reaching the pass. No trace remains in the snow, no footprints, no disturbances, only the memory of movement. Every step of the vehicle or foot along the roadside draws awareness to surrounding shapes. Shadows from peaks and trees twist unnaturally under moonlight, elongating and sometimes appearing to move independently. The crunching footsteps continue in rhythm, always just beyond sight, reinforcing the sense that the pass itself is alive and attentive. Snow and ice reflect faint light, creating ghostly glimmers across the road and ridges. Frosted pines distort depth perception, and valleys carry echoes farther than expected. Even a simple gust of wind can sound like movement along the mountainside, blending with observed figures and the rhythm of crunching snow. Every sound and motion is magnified in the stillness, producing a sense of vastness that is both beautiful and unnerving. Time seems altered along Frostbite Pass. Minutes stretch unpredictably. A short drive or walk feels extended, filled with sound and movement that cannot be accounted for. Pauses to observe the pass heighten awareness, making every shadow, reflection, and faint form seem intentional. Observers report a disorienting rhythm between perception and reality, a sense that each step or glance carries significance beyond ordinary experience. Natural explanations exist. Snow reflects light and creates illusions. Wind can carry sound in strange directions. Ice and frost distort footprints and movement. Fatigue, cold, and low light amplify perception and awareness. Yet these explanations fail to account for the consistency of reports. Figures appear regardless of wind or visibility. Footsteps follow along the road in patterns observers cannot produce. Multiple travelers across different nights report similar phenomena, distant figures, vanished forms, and persistent auditory cues that match movement. The experience is repeatable under similar conditions, suggesting more than chance or imagination. Travelers describe a mixture of awe and unease. The pass is not threatening, yet its presence is undeniable. Figures, shadows, and sounds evoke tension and fascination. Observers report a heightened focus on terrain, motion, and the interaction of light and shadow. Panic may arise when a figure appears unexpectedly, yet the overall experience is immersive, engaging senses and perception fully. By dawn, Frostbite Pass returns to ordinary winter tranquility. Sunlight reflects across snow and ice, restoring clarity and predictable shadows. Figures vanish completely. Footsteps fade. The crunching sound disappears. Travelers passing during daylight may question the events of the night, yet the memory remains vivid, etched with clarity. Each evening, as darkness falls and cold settles over the peaks, Frostbite Pass awakens once more. Figures appear in the distance, approaching then vanishing. Crunching footsteps echo across snowdrifts. Shadows stretch and twist along the road. The pass observes, responds, and interacts subtly with all who enter. It communicates through presence, sound, and motion, and it preserves a quiet, mysterious awareness that exists in the winter night, waiting for those who traverse its frozen curves after sunset. Whispering Pines Road winds through dense forests where tall pine trees rise like silent sentinels along either side of the narrow path. By day, sunlight filters through needles and branches, casting intricate patterns across the road. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of pine resin and damp earth. Birds call from high branches, and the occasional rustle of small animals punctuates the quiet. Visitors walking the road feel isolated yet secure, moving slowly to take in the beauty and stillness of the forest. Shadows lengthen between trunks, stretching across the road and underbrush. The temperature drops slightly, and a stillness settles into the forest that is heavier than ordinary calm. The wind moves differently now, shifting in gentle currents that seem almost deliberate. It threads through the trees carrying sound farther than expected, and every small noise is amplified. The wind carries whispers. Names, faint and soft, drift through the air along with the shifting pine needles. They are not harsh or sudden, but gentle and urgent, curling through the forest and brushing the attention of anyone listening. The whispers pull attention, drawing the eyes toward shadowed paths and areas where the trees grow thickest. Each step along the road is measured against the faint echo of names, creating a rhythm that blends movement and sound into a single experience. The forest seems aware of observation, holding presence in the wind and shadow. Shadows begin to move independently. Between the trunks, dark shapes glide subtly along the edges of vision. They are rarely fully visible and vanish when stared at directly. The forms suggest human posture but are never defined, hovering just beyond perception. Observers sense motion, aware that something unseen is pacing or drifting among the trees. The combination of whisper and shadow creates heightened awareness. Each rustle of a branch, each creak of the forest floor, seems amplified in significance. Steps taken on the road carry weight beyond their physical impact. Peripheral vision captures motion, while the wind carries the whispers in unexpected directions. The forest feels alive with presence, yet it remains silent and distant, never confronting but always attentive. Time begins to feel altered. Minutes stretch and compress unpredictably. Travelers may take a short walk yet feel as though hours have passed, while pauses can feel suspended indefinitely. The rhythm of sound, shadow, and wind replaces ordinary measure of time, aligning perception with the forest itself. Movement along the road becomes uncertain. Landmarks appear closer or farther than expected. Trees seem to shift subtly with attention, guiding the eye and influencing movement. The whispers and shadows maintain their pattern, creating a sense of continuity that is both disorienting and compelling. Travelers feel drawn forward yet remain aware that the path is changing in subtle ways. The wind intensifies in key moments. Gusts brush along shoulders and hair, creating a sense of touch that is fleeting but undeniable. The sensation heightens awareness of surrounding space, reinforcing the perception of presence beyond the ordinary. Names carried by the wind seem more urgent, closer, and the shadows respond in sync with attention, moving in ways that feel both deliberate and natural. Visitors pause frequently. They listen intently, aware that sound and shadow convey information beyond ordinary perception. Each whisper, each rustle, each faint shape contributes to a layered awareness that is immersive and continuous. Observation becomes a form of navigation, guiding both movement and focus. Night deepens, and the effect grows stronger. Shadows blend with the darkness, stretching along the forest floor and clinging to trunks. The wind carries whispers more persistently, layering names and tones across distance. Travelers feel enclosed within an environment that is alive with rhythm and presence, aware that every step and glance matters within this layered space. Dawn gradually restores clarity. Light filters through the pines, dispersing shadows and silencing whispers. Shapes that moved at the edge of vision vanish completely. The wind returns to ordinary behavior, carrying only the natural sounds of rustling leaves and distant birds. The road regains familiar proportions, and perception normalizes. Travelers leave changed. Memory preserves the whispers, shadows, and subtle touches of wind long after leaving the forest. Time, distance, and attention feel altered in recollection, leaving a lingering awareness of presence beyond sight and sound. The forest holds these impressions quietly, waiting for the next visitor. Locals speak of Whispering Pines Road with reverence. They recognize the power of wind, shadow, and perception after dark. Nights when the road seems alive are treated with care and respect. The forest preserves presence and awareness, creating an experience that blends memory, perception, and environment into something tangible yet subtle. By day, the road is ordinary. By night, it becomes a space where wind carries names, shadows move independently, and perception itself is shaped by unseen forces. Those who walk it after dusk feel the forest listening, observing, and guiding awareness in ways that cannot be fully explained. Whispering Pines Road remains patient. It waits, carrying every sound and shadow, reminding travelers that the forest is alive with memory, attention, and subtle presence. Every step along the path, every whispered name, and every flicker of shadow becomes part of a layered experience, marking the road as a place where perception extends beyond ordinary boundaries. And the forest quietly holds witness to all who enter. Crystal Lake Pass winds along the edge of a glacial lake, its waters reflecting the surrounding cliffs and forests during the day. Sunlight glimmers across the surface, highlighting deep blues and greens, while gentle ripples lap at the shoreline. The road curves along the water's edge, bordered by steep slopes and rocky outcrops. Travelers notice the stillness of the lake, the crisp air, and the quiet isolation that accompanies the landscape, a place where the mountains and water meet in serene solitude. Shadows stretch across the road and cliffs, merging with the Lochia's surface until water and darkness become nearly indistinguishable. The air cools sharply, carrying a chill that seeps into clothing and skin. The lake appears to darken and deepen, reflecting the night sky with subtle movement. Silence dominates, yet it is not empty. The stillness carries layers of sound and presence that make travelers aware of every footstep and breath. Figures begin to appear at the water's edge. They stand motionless, dark against the pale reflection of the moon. Their forms are human in outline but lack detail, as if blurred by distance or shadow. They do not move in the conventional sense, yet their presence is undeniable, a quiet assertion that the lake and its shoreline are occupied after dark. Sounds of rowing can be heard. Soft splashes and the subtle scrape of oars cut through the night air. No boats are visible. The noise is rhythmic, deliberate, and seems to move across the surface of the lake, tracing the shoreline with purpose. Each sound blends naturally with the quiet, yet its origin remains untraceable, creating a sense of movement and presence beyond the eye's perception. Shadows along the cliffs appear to respond. Forms stretch along ledges and rock faces, dark shapes that shift with the rhythm of the unseen rowing. Sometimes they seem to watch travelers on the road, stationary and observant, then move slightly, as if acknowledging motion without direct interaction. The combination of figures and sound produces an immersive effect. Observers feel enclosed by the environment, caught between road, water, and cliff. Movement, shadow, and noise occupy perception fully. Each step along the pass is measured against echoes of oars, subtle ripples in water, and the dark form standing at the edge. The lake seems to guide awareness, drawing attention to both distance and detail, to presence without form. Minutes blend together. Shadows and figures appear, vanish, and reappear along the shoreline. The rhythmic sound of oars continues, rising and falling in cycles that are impossible to trace. The lake itself seems alive, holding memory and motion that repeat endlessly, yet never entirely the same. Travelers often report a sense of observation. The figures at the edge of the lake and the shifting shadows convey awareness without threat. The eyes of travelers adjust constantly, tracking movement that may or may not exist. Even without visible confirmation, the presence is felt, pressing gently against perception, heightening every sense. Moonlight glimmers off the water in ways that suggest subtle movement beyond natural ripples. Shadows cast by cliffs and trees shift unpredictably, creating impressions of figures that seem to rise and fall along the shoreline. Reflections on the lake's surface sometimes hint at forms not present on the land itself, deepening the sense of mystery. The experience grows more intense as night deepens. Figures appear more frequently, rowing sounds become layered, and shadows extend further across the cliffs and road. The combination of visual and auditory stimuli creates the impression of a living landscape, one that responds to attention and movement. Travelers feel as if they are part of a silent performance, observers in a scene played out for centuries. By dawn, the pass returns to ordinary perception. Shadows settle into natural positions. The water appears still and unremarkable. Figures vanish entirely, and the sounds of rowing cease. Sunlight illuminates the cliffs and road, revealing the landscape as familiar and serene. Only memory preserves the experience of night, the awareness of unseen watchers and the presence of motion without origin. Visitors leave carrying impressions rather than evidence. They remember dark figures along the shoreline, rhythmic or sounds on a surface that held no boats. And shadows that shifted in response to movement. As well as the feeling that the lake itself contains memory, echoing motion long after the night has ended. Crystal Lake Pass endures as a space of presence and memory. By day, it is calm and scenic, a place for travel and reflection. By night, it becomes alive with figures, sound, and shadow. Where motion exists without explanation, observation persists without form. And travelers experience a landscape both beautiful and profoundly aware. Here, water reflects more than moonlight. Figures stand silently. Oars move without vessels. And at Crystal Lake Pass, the desert and lake watch endlessly. Quietly, and without interruption. And travelers experience a landscape both beautiful and profoundly aware. Iron Cliff Road winds along the edge of a steep mountainside, the sharp cliffs rising abruptly on one side while the valley drops away on the other. By day, the road is narrow but navigable, with sunlight glinting off jagged rock and distant peaks fading into the horizon. The wind carries the scent of stone and pine, and the sound of distant water trickling along the valley floor adds a sense of calm to the otherwise imposing landscape. As the afternoon fades, shadows begin to stretch across the cliffs. Light dims unevenly along the jagged rock faces, and the air grows cooler and heavier. The cliffs seem to dominate the road, their height and angle amplifying every sound and movement. The narrow path feels enclosed, the mountains pressing inward. And the mind grows more aware of subtle anomalies in perception. Travelers often notice the first strange phenomena along the cliffs. Shadows appear crouching along ledges, just beyond clear sight. At first, they are subtle, barely distinguishable from natural rock formations or darker patches of stone. Gradually, they take on a more human-like shape, crouched or leaning, observing silently. When approached, the shadows vanish, leaving the rock face empty and still, yet the sense of awareness lingers. Heavy breathing can be heard nearby. It is not the wind, nor the sound of the vehicle or companion. The breaths are low, deliberate, resonating across the narrow road and cliff faces. They seem to move with the observer, audible at some moments, faint at others. The sound is unsettling because it carries without a visible source, emphasizing the feeling of being watched and followed. The cliffs amplify perception. Every footstep on gravel and stone resonates unnaturally. Loose rocks shift and echo across ledges. Shadows appear intermittently as travelers progress. They crouch, stand, or briefly stretch across ledges, appearing just long enough to register in peripheral vision. When looked at directly, they vanish. The effect is disorienting, as though the cliffs themselves are bending perception. Distances feel altered. Ledges seem closer or farther than they are. The road narrows and widens in the mind's eye, guided by the placement of shadows and the sound of unseen breathing. The combination of visual and auditory phenomena heightens tension. Every glance toward the cliffs draws attention, every movement is measured. The road becomes a corridor of awareness, where the human senses are amplified. Shadows and sounds interplay, guiding perception along the path and producing a sense of presence without confrontation. Travelers become hyper-aware of detail, the texture of rock, the glint of stone, the subtle shifts in air movement. Mist or fog often gathers along the cliffs. It moves silently across ledges, thickening shadows and softening the terrain. Figures appear more distinctly within the haze, crouching or leaning over cliff edges. Light from headlights or fading sun reflects off stone surfaces, creating fleeting shapes that vanish when focus is directed fully toward them. The fog amplifies the sense of isolation and heightens the visibility of the otherwise subtle phenomena. The road tests perception as night falls. Figures and shadows appear more clearly, yet still evade full observation. Breathing persists intermittently, resonating along the narrow path. Rockfall sounds or shifting gravel echo unpredictably, reinforcing the impression of activity just beyond comprehension. Awareness becomes nearly continuous. Each step, each turn of the head, every shift in balance carries heightened significance. The road demands attention, the cliffs impose observation. Light and shadow, sound and perception, converge to create a space that feels alive with awareness. By dawn, Iron Cliff Road returns to ordinary appearance. Shadows vanish, the breathing ceases, and the mist lifts. The cliffs stand silent, the road open and empty. Travelers may question the reality of the night's experience, yet the impressions remain vivid. The crouching figures, the shifting shadows, and the low, resonant breathing. Locals speak quietly of the road. They warn that travelers after dark or in dense fog experience the cliffs differently, that shadows appear along ledges, that unseen sounds resonate along the road, and that perception itself is altered by the steep terrain. The road is a place that observes, a landscape that amplifies awareness, and a path that preserves memory of those who pass. Visitors leave changed. They recall shadows crouching at cliff edges, the sound of breathing without source, the amplified echoes along the road, and the uncanny sensation of being watched. Iron cliff road endures. Cliffs rise sharply. Shadows stretch. Breathing resonates. The road winds tightly along the edge. Those who traverse it understand that every step, glance, and movement is noted, reflected, and amplified by the enduring presence of Iron Cliff Road. Bloodstone Pass stretches across jagged ridges, its red rocks catching the faint light of the moon. Trails wind along the ridges, guiding travelers across the rugged terrain, past abandoned mines and shallow gullies where shadows deepen beneath the sun. The pass is remote, isolated, and commanding, offering both beauty and caution to those who traverse it. The red rocks seem to glow faintly under the moon, casting long, deep shadows across the slopes. Colors intensify, appearing almost otherworldly as the contrast between illuminated peaks and shadowed valleys grows. The ridges become more difficult to navigate visually, blending into each other under the soft, silvery light. Figures appear along the ridges. They are human in shape but vague at the edges, silhouettes moving deliberately along paths where no clear trail exists. Abandoned mine shafts add to the experience. Observers describe them pacing steadily, sometimes standing silently on outcroppings, sometimes gliding along narrow ridges. Their presence is undeniable, yet they never approach, never speak, and their footsteps are either imperceptible or echo strangely across the rocks. Travelers notice lights flickering intermittently within the dark openings of old mines. The glow is faint, sometimes appearing as a soft shimmer, other times flaring briefly before fading. No movement is seen inside, and the entrances remain undisturbed. The effect suggests activity where none should exist, and combined with the figures along the ridges, creates a sense of a landscape alive with hidden observation. Sound carries strangely across the pass. Footsteps echo unevenly, amplifying the sense of space. Wind through crevices produces whispers and low hums, subtle but disorienting. Rocks beneath the feet shift faintly, producing sounds that seem to come from directions inconsistent with reality. Travelers describe the sensation of being surrounded by presence, though no one is immediately visible. The glow of the rocks affects perception. Shadows lengthen and shift as observers move, and ridges appear closer or farther than they truly are. Depth and distance seem unreliable, contributing to disorientation. Figures on distant peaks can appear impossibly large or small depending on the angle of vision. The terrain itself feels altered, stretching in some areas, compressing in others. Temperature shifts unexpectedly. The terrain itself feels altered, stretching in some areas, compressing in others. Even on warm nights, cold pockets appear along ridges or in gullies. A chill brushes across skin, flowing along shoulders or the back of the neck. Time behaves strangely within the pass. A brief walk across a ridge can feel much longer than expected. Observers report minutes stretching into what seems like hours. While standing still can create the sensation of frozen time. The figures do not interact. They remain distant, silent, and deliberate. Mine lights flicker unpredictably. Shadows inside openings shift with intensity, casting reflections onto surrounding rock faces. Travelers perceive movement within the darkness, though nothing emerges from the shafts. The lights respond subtly to attention, flaring when observed and dimming when ignored. Disorientation heightens awareness. Observers report a mixture of awe and unease. The glow, shadows, and flickering lights demand focus. Peripheral vision registers movement that disappears when looked at directly. Steps feel longer or shorter than expected, distance is uncertain, and depth perception altered by light and shadow interplay. The pass is not physically dangerous. No figure approaches in aggression. The mine shafts remain structurally sound. Slopes and ridges are stable underfoot. Danger lies in perception, in the stretching of time, and the heightened sense of observation. Travelers must remain attentive and cautious to navigate safely. Daylight restores ordinary perception. Ridges become distinct and predictable. Shadows behave naturally. Mine shafts appear empty and dark. Figures vanish, the glow disappears, and the landscape returns to normal scale and proportion. At night, Bloodstone Pass transforms. Red rocks glow under moonlight. Figures move along ridges. Lights flicker in abandoned mine shafts. Shadows stretch, temperature shifts unexpectedly, and perception of time and space warps. Travelers experience heightened awareness, disorientation, and the subtle presence of memory and observation within the landscape. Bloodstone Pass endures as a place where history, perception, and landscape converge. It preserves the legacy of miners, travelers, and the natural forces that shaped the rocks. Figures and lights evoke the persistence of presence, while shadows and moonlight distort perception. Those who traverse the pass at night witness a space alive with memory, light, and subtle awareness. A landscape that watches silently from the ridges above the desert floor. Dark Hollow Pass winds through a narrow valley, flanked by steep cliffs and dense forest. As the sun lowers, the atmosphere begins to shift. Shadows lengthen along the road and across the valley floor. Light fades unevenly through the cliffs, and the air grows cooler and heavier. A sense of stillness settles over the pass, amplified by the narrowing canyon walls and the thickening forest. Even minor sounds become distinct, each crunch of gravel or rustle of leaves echoing farther than expected. After sunset, fog begins to form along the valley. It rises in banks that appear suddenly, curling over the road and around bends. Visibility diminishes quickly, reducing the familiar landscape to pale gray shapes and silhouettes. The road appearing longer, the cliffs taller, and the surrounding forest darker than memory suggests. Whispers emerge from the mist. Soft at first, unintelligible murmurs drift across the asphalt and along embankments. Voices seem to move from side to side, carried along the fog as if circling those on the road. Travelers instinctively pause, scanning the foggy edges for movement, yet nothing is visible. The sound grows subtly in volume and intensity when attention focuses, then fades when eyes shift elsewhere, creating a rhythm that is disorienting and deliberate. Footsteps accompany the whispers. They are light and irregular, crunching in gravel or on frost-coated soil at the road's edges. Sometimes they seem to follow vehicles slowly around bends. At other times, they appear ahead or behind without warning. Observers report a tension that grows naturally as the sounds move unpredictably, evoking heightened awareness without threatening force. Shadows appear briefly at the bends. Dark shapes emerge at the edges of fog banks, sometimes on cliff ledges or in tree lines. They are humanoid in form but indistinct, their proportions blurred by mist and dim light. Figures may stand, pace slowly, or disappear in moments. Travelers rarely get a full view, a blink or slight movement often makes the shadow vanish entirely. The effect is deliberate, rhythmic, and consistent, producing both fascination and unease. The pass seems to respond to observation. Movement along the road, focus of attention, and changes in speed influence the perception of shadow and sound. Pause at a bend, and whispers may rise slightly. Move quickly, and footsteps echo closer or vanish entirely. Shadows may appear where none were noticed, elongating or shifting with observer movement. The interaction is subtle yet unmistakable, giving the impression that the pass is aware. Time feels altered on Dark Hollow Pass at night. Minutes stretch unpredictably. A short drive along a bend can feel prolonged, filled with echoes of footsteps, whispers, and shifting shapes. Pausing to observe creates a heightened awareness of sound and space. Depth and distance are unreliable, producing a sense of disorientation and attentiveness that immerses travelers completely in the environment. Natural explanations exist. Fog can distort light, distance, and shadow. Sound can travel unpredictably through valleys and trees. Visual perception at low light can exaggerate shapes and movement. Fatigue, cold, and isolation heighten sensitivity to subtle motion and sound. Yet these explanations do not account for consistency. Figures appear regularly at bends under calm conditions. Footsteps accompany travelers even when no one is present. Whispers move in patterns repeated across multiple nights and by multiple observers. The phenomenon is reproducible under similar conditions, suggesting the past interacts subtly with attention and presence rather than relying on random chance or imagination. Travelers describe a mix of awe and unease. The combination of fog, shadows, whispers, and footsteps creates tension and fascination. The past does not threaten physically, yet the environment commands attention and respect. Observers report a quiet apprehension, a sense of being noticed, and heightened perception of terrain and movement. The experience is immersive, engaging senses fully and altering ordinary perception of space and time. By dawn, dark hollow pass appears ordinary. Sunlight disperses fog and illuminates cliffs and trees. Shadows fall naturally along the road. Figures vanish. Whispers and footsteps disappear, leaving only the quiet rhythm of birds, wind, and stream. Travelers passing during daylight often question the events of the previous night, though memory of sound, shadow, and movement remains vivid and unforgettable. Each night, as darkness falls and fog rises, the pass awakens again. Whispers drift through mist. Footsteps follow unseen paths. Shadows form briefly at bends. Dark hollow pass does not harm. It observes, responds, and interacts with those who traverse it after sunset. The valley holds memory, presence, and subtle awareness. Allowing travelers to witness a landscape alive with quiet, mysterious life under the veil of fog and night. Old Prospectora Pass winds through rugged hills and narrow valleys, a trail carved and worn by decades of footsteps from those who once sought gold. By day, the path appears weathered but ordinary, with dusty rocks underfoot and the faint scent of pine and earth lingering in the air. Sunlight glances off cliff faces, highlighting ridges and small crevices where wildflowers cling. Visitors walk the trail slowly, noticing the subtle unevenness of the path, the rustle of dry leaves, and the occasional distant call of a hawk. As evening falls, the pass begins to change. Shadows lengthen across the trail, stretching along rock walls and through sparse vegetation. The temperature drops slightly, and a stillness settles over the landscape, heavier than the natural calm of daylight. Every sound is carried further than expected, echoing off rocks and cliffs in ways that create the impression of movement beyond the line of sight. Spectral figures begin to appear along the trail. They emerge subtly at first, dim outlines of miners from another time. Some appear kneeling or bending, working the earth with pickaxes and shovels, as if engaged in labor long past. Others stand upright, observing, their forms ghostly and indistinct, fading at the edges. The figures never approach directly but remain visible enough to suggest presence and purpose. Travelers feel compelled to watch. The spectral miners move in rhythm with the imagined beat of their tools, their labor deliberate and repetitive. Each swing of a pickaxe, each shift of body weight, aligns with the echoing sounds of rock and gravel underfoot. The figures convey motion and effort, though no physical impact is observed on the trail itself. Cold brushes accompany presence. Travelers report sudden, fleeting sensations against the shoulders or neck, subtle but undeniable. The air itself seems to press lightly, heightening awareness of movement and sound along the trail. Each sensation enhances attention, creating a layered perception of space where ghostly labor and physical presence intertwine. Echoes of past activity accompany observers. Footsteps of invisible workers seem to resonate along cliffs, blending with natural sounds of wind and rustling vegetation. The strike of pickaxes, faint but rhythmic, adds texture to the auditory environment. Travelers walking slowly notice patterns in sound, aligning with glimpses of spectral figures, reinforcing the sensation that the trail is alive with memory. Minutes stretch unpredictably, as attention focuses on laboring figures, flickering shadows, and subtle touches of cold air. Steps seem longer than they are, distances shift in perception, and familiar landmarks appear altered. The trail feels suspended between past and present, holding both memory and immediate observation simultaneously. Travelers pause instinctively. Observation becomes a form of interaction. Each step is measured, every glance deliberate, as the path guides attention without action. Figures continue laboring or standing silently, their rhythm uninterrupted by those who move alongside the trail. Presence is felt, not challenged, creating an immersive experience of layered awareness. Shadows extend along cliffs and vegetation. The spectral forms blend with deepening darkness, elongating along rocks and shrubs. Light from fading sunlight or artificial sources creates movement where none exists, and the eye struggles to separate form from shadow. Observers catch glimpses out of the corner of their eyes, then see the trail empty when looked at directly. The environment responds subtly to attention. Figures appear slightly differently depending on observer focus, and sounds seem to align with gaze and motion. The trail guides perception, blending echoes, shadows, and subtle sensations into a coherent yet surreal experience. The pass feels alive with presence, though it remains distant and unobtrusive. Dawn restores clarity. Sunlight disperses shadows, softens contours, and reveals the trail as ordinary once more. Spectral miners vanish, leaving no trace of their labor. Cold brushes disappear, and the echoes of unseen activity fade with the morning breeze. The rocks, dust, and vegetation regain their natural form and proportion. Travelers leave changed. They recall the swinging pickaxes, the kneeling figures, the subtle taps of cold air, and the amplified echoes of invisible movement. Distances, time, and perception retain the imprint of the night, leaving awareness sharpened and memory vivid. The trail preserves the experience, blending past and present into a lingering impression. Locals speak of old Prospectora's pass with quiet respect. They remember the miners of another era, the labor left behind in memory, and the nights when visitors encounter presence beyond the ordinary. By day, the pass is ordinary. By night, it becomes alive with shadow, echo, and presence. Figures move in rhythm with invisible labor, cold brushes remind of unseen attention, and echoes carry the memory of effort through the narrow valley. Old Prospectora's pass quietly preserves history in motion. A space where the past lingers in shadow, sound, and sensation. Those who walk it after dark experience labor, awareness, and perception beyond the visible. Stepping into a trail where memory and presence intertwine. And the gold seekers of old continue their work unseen but ever present. Eagles perch road winds along the high ridges of the mountains, its asphalt narrow and punctuated by sharp curves that cling to cliff edges. By day, the road is dramatic but navigable. Sunlight illuminates sheer drops, jagged rocks, and the distant valleys below. Travelers notice the expansive view, the crisp mountain air, and the quiet majesty of the surrounding peaks. Each turn of the road feels deliberate, a careful balance between elevation and edge, commanding respect from those who drive or hike along it. As night falls, the road transforms. Shadows stretch across the asphalt, merging with cliffs and distant slopes. The temperature drops sharply, cold air cutting through clothing and skin. The temperature drops sharply, cold air cutting through clothing and skin. Darkness blankets the ridges, turning the surrounding landscape into a series of shapes that are hard to distinguish from one another. Darkness blankets the ridges, turning the surrounding landscape into a series of shapes that are hard to distinguish from one another. Silence dominates, yet it carries weight, a presence that presses gently against perception, heightening awareness of every sound, every movement, and every curve along the road. Figures begin to appear along cliff edges. Dark shapes perch motionless atop rocks and ledges, silhouettes against the faint glow of moonlight. They are distinctly human in outline yet impossibly still, as if frozen in place. Observers report that these forms appear unexpectedly, rising from shadows where no trail or path exists. They remain attentive, watching those who travel the road without ever stepping forward. When approached, they vanish into darkness, leaving only the memory of presence. Soft flapping echoes through the ridges, rhythmic and deliberate. Shadows on the cliffs respond to attention. Observers notice movement at the edges of vision, slight shifts that suggest observation or adjustment. Figures on ridges sometimes tilt, shift, or rise, responding subtly to presence without crossing the road or descending the cliff. Awareness of these shadows creates a heightened sense of caution and attention, compelling travelers to move slowly and deliberately. The combination of sound and shadow creates immersion. The flapping of wings, distant echoes, and shifting silhouettes dominate perception. Every curve of the road, every jutting rock, every cliff edge is highlighted, drawing attention to the landscape itself. The experience is both exhilarating and disorienting, as if the road guides attention, shaping perception of space, height, and movement. Time stretches unnaturally along the ridge. Minutes blend as figures reappear along the cliff edges, shadows shift, and wing sounds repeat in cycles that defy simple explanation. The environment exerts subtle influence. Even without visible figures, travelers feel awareness pressing from the edges of ridges. Shadows lengthen and shift in rhythm with the imagined motion of wings. The air seems charged with expectation, the road narrower, the cliffs sharper. Every movement along the asphalt is mirrored by subtle shifts in light and perception, reinforcing the sensation that the ridge itself is alive. Light behaves unusually. Moonlight reflects off rocks and asphalt in ways that create fleeting shapes. Shadows stretch and compress, sometimes forming temporary outlines that suggest figures perched along edges where none exist. Headlights illuminate ridges briefly, revealing forms that vanish the moment the light fully touches them. Reflections on distant rock faces sometimes suggest wings or motion, enhancing the impression of presence. Observers experience heightened senses as every curve, cliff, and ridge draws attention. The winged sounds, distant silhouettes, and sudden chills create an effect. Where the landscape feels purposeful, reacting subtly to movement, observation, and attention. Travelers become part of the ridge itself, perceiving presence without substance. By dawn, Eagle's Perch Road returns to ordinary perception. Shadows settle, wing sounds vanish, and figures disappear completely. The asphalt appears smooth and unchanged. Cliffs and ridges are well defined in morning light, and the temperature warms with sunrise. Only memory retains the experience of night, the awareness of perched figures and the echo of wings across the ridge. Travelers leave carrying impressions of observation and presence. They recall silhouettes on cliff edges, the rhythmic flapping of wings with no birds, and the sensation of being watched. Each curve of the road, each exposed ridge, and every subtle shift in shadow remains vivid. The ridge feels larger, sharper, and more alive in memory than it did in daylight. Eagle's Perch Road endures as a place of perception, presence, and memory. By day, it is scenic and imposing, a high-altitude road commanding views of the valley below. By day, it is scenic and imposing, a high-altitude road commanding views of the valley below. By night, it is alive with figures perched along cliffs, wings flapping across the ridges, and shadows that move without form. Travelers experience the road as both landscape and participant, a space where the high ridges themselves seem to observe, where presence persists beyond the visible, and where the night holds awareness silently and without end. Here, the cliffs rise sharply. shadows perch. Wings echo through darkness. And at Eagle's Perch Road, the ridge watches endlessly, silently, and with deliberate patience. Coyote Crossing stretches across barren desert terrain, a narrow road cutting through miles of sparse scrub and jagged rock. By day, the landscape is vast and empty, the horizon seemingly endless under a pale blue sky. Sunlight bakes the sand and stones, the heat rising in waves from the earth. Travelers notice how quiet the desert is, the stillness broken only by distant birds or the wind sweeping across ridges and washes. Footsteps on gravel echo softly, reminding visitors of the solitude that dominates the land. Shadows stretch across the road, stretching long and dark along rock formations and sand dunes. The temperature drops quickly, and the wind becomes sharper, carrying the scent of dry earth and dust. The horizon seems to extend further, colors muted in the fading light. The open expanse takes on a sense of both isolation and heightened awareness. Visitors often hear the first signs of anomaly in sound. Distant howls echo across the desert, haunting and melodic. They are unmistakably animal, yet the source is difficult to locate. The wind carries them, bending and amplifying each note, making it impossible to determine direction or distance. Interspersed with the howls are footsteps, soft and deliberate, echoing along the road as if something or something is moving in tandem with the observer. Figures appear on the horizon. At first, they are small, indistinct shapes, barely perceptible against the fading light. Gradually, outlines become more defined, human-like forms standing, walking slowly along ridges or distant sections of the road. They do not approach, and when observers attempt to move toward them, they vanish instantly, leaving the horizon empty. The effect is fleeting yet persistent, a presence that is seen and felt but cannot be reached. The desert amplifies perception. Every footstep, every shift in balance, every sound is magnified across the flat stretches of terrain. Gravel underfoot crunches sharply. Wind whistles across stones and scrub, carrying echoes that seem too deliberate for nature alone. Shadows move with subtle intent. Fading light casts shapes that are neither entirely natural nor fully perceptible. They stretch along dunes, vanish into washes, and reappear briefly along rock outcroppings. Peripheral vision often captures movement that disappears when directly observed. Travelers describe a sensation of being accompanied, of attention without threat, where the landscape itself seems responsive to awareness. The howls intensify at night. They seem closer, threading through the still air and echoing across the desert floor. The open expanse feels both larger and narrower, distance distorted by shadow, light, and perception. Figures appear again, fleeting, silhouetted along the horizon, then vanish completely when approached. Travelers report heightened senses. They seem closer, threading through the still air and echoing across the desert floor. The open expanse feels both larger and narrower, distance distorted by shadow, light, and perception. Figures appear again, fleeting, silhouetted along the horizon, then vanish completely when approached. Travelers report heightened senses. Every sound is scrutinized, every movement analyzed. The desert seems alive, responding subtly to presence and attention. Eyes scan the horizon constantly, tuned to detail, catching glimpses of figures, shadows, and movement in the dim light. Awareness is amplified, blending perception with the impression of memory, shaping the experience into one of both awe and unease. The experience is persistent but not threatening. The figures at the horizon do not advance. The howls carry no immediate danger. Yet the road and desert enforce attention, commanding focus on the horizon, the road, and the surrounding landscape. Each step along the gravel becomes deliberate. The mind sharpens, attuned to both presence and absence. By midnight, the desert is fully transformed. Figures appear clearly along the horizon, shadows stretch across dunes, and howls echo from all directions. The open expanse feels alive with observation. The stillness of the desert amplifies each sound and shape, producing a heightened perception where every detail matters. Travelers feel the persistent awareness of the landscape, a rhythm of attention woven through sound, shadow, and open space. By dawn, Coyote Crossing returns to its ordinary appearance. Figures vanish. Howls fade. Shadows align with sunlight. The desert stretches quiet and empty. Travelers may doubt the events of the night, yet memory preserves the experience. The ghostly figures, the echoing footsteps, and the haunting calls carried by the wind. Locals speak cautiously of the road. They warn that after dark, or in fading light, the desert shifts. Figures may appear along the horizon, howls echo without source, and perception is altered by open space, shadow, and sound. They describe a landscape that observes, responding subtly to those who traverse it, and preserving the memory of each presence along the barren road. Visitors leave changed. They recall the figures, the distant howls, the echoing footsteps, and the sensation of being accompanied without threat. Coyote Crossing endures. Those who traverse it understand that every step, every glance, every breath is reflected and preserved along the long, sparse road of Coyote Crossing. Last light pass winds through the mountains, a narrow ribbon of asphalt that clings to cliffs and ridges before dropping into the valley below. By day, the road is dramatic and commanding, flanked by jagged rocks, pine trees, and sheer drops. Trails and overlooks provide views of the landscape, distant peaks stretching toward the horizon. The pass appears ordinary, navigable, and scenic, inviting travelers to experience the mountains and the valley beyond. Night transforms the road. Darkness descends quickly, swallowing edges of cliffs and blending forested slopes into shadow. The headlights of a vehicle carve narrow beams into blackness, illuminating only small portions of the path ahead. Fog sometimes drifts between ridges, thickening without warning, muting sound and compressing space. The road feels isolated, longer than it should, and perception shifts subtly with every mile. Visitors report a distortion of time. Minutes stretch unpredictably. Driving a section that should take moments can feel prolonged, as if distance and duration have separated from expectation. Observers notice that the landscape seems to move differently than anticipated, shadows stretching, ridges appearing farther or nearer, and the headlights revealing new features that were not visible moments ago. They stand silently along the roadside, human in form but strange in posture and presence. Some are partially obscured by fog or shadows. They do not move toward vehicles, yet the sense of being observed is immediate and tangible. Glances toward them often reveal a figure standing still, then vanishing when observed directly. The experience is unnerving but not overtly threatening. Lights flicker unpredictably. Vehicle headlights sometimes dim or flare briefly. Street markers, reflective signs, and metal posts reflect light in unusual patterns. Some travelers report interior instrument lights dimming or failing momentarily as they pass certain points. These occurrences are brief yet noticeable, creating a sense that the road responds to presence or attention. The environment heightens sensory awareness. Every sound is amplified. Tires on asphalt, wind rushing past, and small debris underfoot echo sharply through the headlights a cone. The crunch of gravel seems louder than expected, the whisper of trees closer. Travelers notice subtle changes in air temperature and pressure, a faint chill or draft moving along the cabin, brushing skin unexpectedly. Time distortion affects perception of movement. Curves that should be familiar feel longer. Ascending slopes appear slower than expected. Descending dips appear unnaturally quick. Passing a figure or landmark can alter the sense of duration, leaving observers unsure how long it has been since entering the pass or how far they have traveled. Shadows cling to trees and rocks, stretching unnaturally across the road. Figures seem to appear and disappear at the edges of vision. The fog moves with subtle unpredictability, forming pockets of obscure terrain, creating the impression that the road itself is alive, observing each vehicle and traveler. Observers report a subtle tension. It is not panic, but heightened awareness. Muscles tighten slightly, breathing becomes conscious, and attention narrows to the road, headlights, and shifting shapes at the edges of perception. Even familiar curves require deliberate care. Each mile demands focus, while the mind registers an underlying presence beyond ordinary comprehension. The figures remain silent. They never speak or approach. Their presence is still and deliberate, seeming to mark sections of the road or areas where observation is most acute. Drivers report the sensation of being noted, the feeling that attention is returned even without interaction. Fog, shadows, and lights combine to distort orientation. Distances appear altered. Headlights reveal terrain in a way that is disjointed from memory or daylight experience. Roadside features, cliffs, and trees shift in perceived location. Travelers may glance at a marker and find it moved slightly when looked at again. The effect is subtle but cumulative, enhancing awareness while creating uncertainty. Despite the intensity, the road is physically safe. There are no sudden drops or invisible obstacles. Figures do not obstruct passage. Danger arises from perception, disorientation, and the heightened awareness of presence, fog, and altered time. Travelers must maintain focus and caution to navigate safely. Fog disperses, shadows fall naturally, and vehicle instruments return to normal function. The sensation of figures, flickering lights, and distorted time fades gradually, leaving memory of the experience and heightened awareness. By day, last light pass appears ordinary. The road is navigable, curves predictable, ridges and slopes clearly defined. Fog is absent, figures are invisible, and lights behave normally. Travel feels natural, distances match expectation, and the perception of time is restored. At night, the pass transforms. Figures stand silently in headlights. Lights flicker unpredictably. Fog thickens, shadows stretch, and the mind registers distortion of time and distance. Observers feel watched, aware, and subtly disoriented. Every curve, slope, and roadside feature becomes charged with heightened presence. Last light pass endures as a place where perception, environment, and memory converge. It preserves the legacy of the mountains, the dangers of the road, and the awareness of those who travel it after dark. Travelers witness an environment alive with shadow, light, and observation, a passage that tests attention, endurance, and perception while carrying the echo of all who have passed before. Thank you for traveling with me through Wyoming's haunted mountain passes tonight. These roads are breathtaking, yet treacherous, carrying memories of countless lost travelers. Some travelers leave shaken. Some vanish without trace. Some feel the mountain follow them long after the journey ends. If you ever drive along a mountain pass at night and see figures on the roadside or hear footsteps behind you, step carefully. Would you dare drive alone through one of these haunted passes? Or would you leave before the shadows fully awaken? Rest well, my friend. Until our next journey into the haunted mountains.